name Sean Corbett. A little bit of a preamble. We live in one of the most centralised countries in the whole world. And I take it that your view is that Scotland would not be the most centralised in the world. Otherwise, we're just replacing one set of people for another set of people. There is absolute evidence that the top 10 countries in the world all have smaller local authorities than we have. They believe in subsidiarity. If you look at our local authorities in Scotland, they have an average of about 160,000 people, and the average in the Nordic countries, and indeed Germany, is about 16,000 people, with all of the powers that our local authorities have. And they also have the situation where they don't depend on 80% of their funding from central government. So it's a difficult question, but is among the politicians among you, and comments from the others please, is there any willingness to get subsidiarity really going in this country, or are we just going to get more of the same?
Great question. So the question is, let's not just replace one set of bureaucrats in London with another set of bureaucrats in Edinburgh. I don't think there are any actual politicians in the panel, but let's see who wants to have a go at that.
Yes.
You're the councillor? You're the mayor. Nobody told me.
Yeah, in amongst all that talk about being a veteran and a teacher and a husband and a father, when I'm not doing some of those latter ones, I'm a councillor in Glasgow, and I've been a councillor for just over 2 years now, and it's been a real education getting involved in local government. And I represent Partick West, where there's, at the last census, I think it was about 34,000 constituents, or residents, which is more than the Western Isles. So I, as a local elected representative, have more people in my patch than an MSP in the Western Isles does. I also learned in the last 2 years that the community councils in my area, and community councils in general, or across the country, get £200 a year, but they're only allowed to spend it on headed notepaper to send letters out to people. And I am the first level you get to where somebody gets paid to be an elected representative. If you listen to people like Leslie Riddick, I heard her for the first time during the summer, she talks about what she calls localism, which I think is what you were talking about. So there is a risk that we move from centralised rule in London to centralised rule in Edinburgh. But this discussion is already happening at my level, and it's already happening within my party. And the local government minister, I've had the pleasure of being in his company a few times, and he's talked about this. And we are in the business of establishing a new country. We're activists. Yeah, I'm a politician, but when I'm not dealing with dog poo and bins, I'm an activist. And my activity is building a new country, Scotland. And it won't stop at just transferring power from London to Edinburgh. It will stop at pushing power down, sovereignty of the people, all the way down to a local level, so that people can look after their communities rather than have to contact a councillor and say the road hasn't been swept. They'll have a community council that's empowered to deal with such issues.
Thank you very much. Philip?
Yeah. Can I just
fire away, you get the mic.
With the mic? Yeah, thanks for that, John. Absolutely great point. One of the wonderful things about this movement, is the terms we used earlier, is that people's voices, possibly for the first time ever, certainly, I know that I've never done anything like this before, their voices are being heard. And I think once people have a taste of that, they're going to keep on going. So I absolutely agree with it. I think the way we do our democracy, we know there's something far wrong in the UK, but I absolutely don't think it can just be replacing London with Edinburgh. The way we do our democracy is really largely not evolved properly, and there's a huge opportunity for us to change that in terms of this is our movement, this is the people of Scotland, this is our movement, this isn't a political movement, it's a people's movement, if you like. So I absolutely agree with devolving down and harnessing all this energy and looking at creative and adaptive ways we can use technology, looking at some of the groups that are emerging, the likes of the kind of common wheel, how they harness all these ideas. It's absolutely vital. The one worry I have is that we will have such a big project on our hands, if you think about sort of independence, where there's so much we've got to do. Can we do all these things? Can we do it fast enough? One thing I've been saying to people is that we, all of us, and we've all got a responsibility here, we can't get back in our box And I suppose that's the point I was making when I asked those rhetorical questions at the beginning. Whose responsibility is it to affect these changes? It's our responsibility, and one thing above all else has emerged for this from me: no longer can we push it back to they, because look where it's got us, and that will continue to apply in an independent Scotland.
Philippa and then Joe.
Well, Michelle has said most of it. I mean, traipsing around the place and seeing people who have organised meetings, particularly a lot of women's meetings I do, Women for Independence cafes, and people who have organised, got up, spoken out, their voice is up and out. And exactly the phrase that Michelle used, you know, they're not to go back in their boxes on the 19th. And there is talk about, you know, moving down, trebling the number of councils that we have so that it's a smaller group. And if you look at some of the places in Europe, like in France, where it's less than 1 in 100, so it's something like 1 in 80 people will serve on one of their local councils. And we are something like 1 in 2,500. So, you know, we are just not active. And yet we've been active now, so we need to stay that. And I think that will happen. There's an absolute drive for that to happen from the bottom, as well as Fergal talking about, a recognition from the top to let go of that and move that out.
Thank you, Joe.
And there's one additional opportunity, sir. For the first time in our history, an opportunity to embed these rights, these values, to inscribe them in a written constitution for Scotland, which all of our fingerprints will be part of as we work together as citizens. I would also direct you to the city of Washington, D.C., where I was an elected councilman in the early 1980s. There they have a system of advisory neighborhood councils, which are also elected councillors with budgets that they control, and they're allowed to spend it for more than stationary. And no decision is passed on to the city council without first approval at a local level. And a councillor at an advisory neighborhood council has a constituency or residence of about 1,500 to 2,000 persons. So it's manageable. We could have a similar system, as Fergal is saying, to push those powers down to the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm sensing that the evening is reaching a natural moment where we can get back to the rest of our lives. I want to thank you for coming along tonight. I want you to thank you for your engagement in what's been a smashing evening. I want to ask you to thank first of all, our beautiful assistants. And then I want you to thank each and every one of the panel who have brought something quite different and special. I think we're blessed with some excellent politicians in Scotland, but we're even more blessed by committed citizens who are speaking to us tonight on an issue that bothers them. And I think that's the most fabulous thing of this referendum, is the level of democratic engagement and renewal that we're living through. So, first of all, for Joe Goldblad. For Councillor Fergal Dalton.
Yeah.
The wonderful Michelle Thompson. I've now set a precedent for myself that's going to be damning. The fantastic Dr. Philippa Whitford. The remarkable Vengo Chia. And the wondrous Tasmina Amish. I want to say in concluding, as Tasmina says, there are 24 sleeps to go. What a thought. I encourage all of us to reflect on the fact that we are now the 48th generation to have lived in Scotland since the country was born. Generation 48. We are blessed with an amazing opportunity and power to take a decision for the first time about who we are as a country. And we owe it to ourselves, but much more importantly, we owe it to generation 49, 50 and all the ones that come next to take this decision with a clear head and to access both our brain and our heart as we do it, because it's a big moment. This is not any ordinary election, this is not any ordinary choice, this is a big moment. Somebody quoted Harry Potter earlier. The wonderful author of that book wrote those stories not far from where we're sat now tonight. And one of the quotes I always tell my children is from Dumbledore to Harry. and he's chastising him for being too impetuous as a youngster, and he says, "It's our choices, Harry, that determine who we are far more than our abilities." And it's a great thought for a child, isn't it? It keeps a precocious, clever one settled, and it tells the rest that there's hope, no matter what happens. It's like the song, it's not what you're given, it's what you do with what you've got. And that's the question we face in a few days' time. As Tasmina also said, every year since the war, on average 2 countries have been formed. It's a normal process. No one's gone in the other direction. So this is it, folks. Sleep well for 24 nights, and then choose well on the morning that follows.
Here, here.